Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the No Sugar Podcast. I am your host, Janice McAfee with Loggia. And today we are speaking with Emmanuel. He is with the Ancients, or his project rather, is the Ancient Warriors Empire. It's an NFT collection, and we are super excited to have you with us here, Emmanuel. Why don't you introduce yourself?
It's great to be here. Thanks, Janice, for the warm intro. My name is Emmanuel. I'm from New Jersey, but my parents are from Nigeria. I studied at Princeton University sociology while I was there, but was very much involved in the entrepreneurship ecosystem as well. Caught the crypto bug in 2017. Took me a while before I got to the point where I fully took the jump into crypto. I spent a couple years doing consulting before that. But about last year, coming into the summer, I really got excited about NFTs, started flipping NFTs as a way to basically just give myself an extra income, quit my job, and then pretty much was relying completely on NFTs. And at that point, I think I just felt that there was a lot of crazy stuff going on in the space, a lot of animal-focused projects that didn't necessarily appeal to me or people that came from my background. And so I decided to put out an NFT collection of my own, Ancient Warriors NFT, as the first major Africa-focused and Latin American-focused NFT collection. And so, yeah, I'm excited to talk more about the journey, getting that started, and also just all the other interesting things that we've done in the space since then.
You don't like animals, Emmanuel?
I like animals, but, you know, there's a time and place for everything.
I hear you. So, if I could just start off, because this would also be, I think, a good place to start our discussion. Why don't you pretend as if Janice and I are stupid, and so are our audience members, and explain to us NFTs. And I know that often in the crypto space, we can assume certain common ground when we speak with each other. And in this case, some of that is true, certainly not only with us, but with our audience. But why don't we assume for a second that nobody even knows what you mean when you say that, and briefly start there.
Sounds good. An NFT is a non-fungible token. That word is not helpful whatsoever, so maybe just ignore that for now. An NFT is essentially a digital collectible. It can be an image. In most cases, it tends to be an image because that's the kind of the easiest thing to do is just, hey, let's take this piece of art and let's put it online and let's call it an NFT. That's the most basic explanation I can give there. But the important distinction between an NFT and just a random picture that you would find on Google Images is that an NFT lives on the blockchain. So think about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. That's basically taking dollars and putting them on a blockchain. An NFT is taking a picture and putting that on the blockchain, right? So there's a lot of kind of interesting aspects to it, but I think some of the more important things to understand about that is that by putting an NFT on the blockchain, it enables anyone to essentially track that picture and see who was the original owner of that picture, who was that picture sold to, who owns it now. These are all things that you're not necessarily able to do with just basic images that you find on Google Images. But with NFTs, you can track the ownership, and that enables you to assign value to the NFTs. And that's why you've seen over the past year that NFTs have really blown up in terms of like how much people have been trading them, billions of dollars worth of NFT sales from people to people, whereas you haven't seen that same level of financial transactions for normal digital art before NFTs.
Okay, amazing. So how did you then get involved, or how did you come up with the idea for your Ancient Warriors? Obviously, you're having your parents being from Nigeria. I'm sure that might have had some influence on that, but what exactly were you hoping to bring to the public with this project? Maybe something that's not out there already, I guess, maybe.
The idea of Ancient Warriors really stemmed from ideas that myself, my family members, my best friends have discussed throughout our entire lives. Just the fact that our people tend to be misrepresented and underrepresented across tech, across finance, across a lot of the leading fields that are producing a lot of the value in the world and the money in the world, our people tend to not really be involved in the creation and the leading of these types of industries. So with NFTs, we saw essentially a new type of technology that a lot of people were leveraging to do interesting things. And we looked around and we tried to see, hey, who from our background, who that has my skin color is in this space. There were some people in the space, but for the most part, it was very much lacking. And we felt that we as the stewards of culture in a lot of senses, right? Hip hop music and rock music and jazz music, and listen to all of these different aspects of kind of not just American culture, but worldwide culture that has stemmed from people that come from our backgrounds. We should be stewards of culture as well in this kind of like blockchain art ecosystem that's starting to develop, right? There's so many talented people that come from our backgrounds. We just need to expose them to this and they'll run with the wind. So that was the thinking initially. And we were thinking like, what's the best way for us to do this? And we actually felt that, hey, this NFT concept is catching a lot of wind right now. A lot of people are excited about it. If we take advantage of this moment to put out an NFT that depicts people that come from our culture and appeals to people that come from our background, that will actually lead to more people that look like us coming into the space. Because literally, if you hear about Bitcoin, that might not be convincing enough for you to come into crypto. But if you see a piece of art that just looks good, you have no idea whether or not it's crypto related, you don't know that it's an NFT, but you just see a piece of art that just looks good, and it's just like a black warrior that looks like strong and fierce in an empowering way that you don't often see being portrayed of our people, you're just going to want to know more naturally. And that was really like the hook of Ancient Warriors. It wasn't the fact that it was a crypto or an NFT project. It was the fact that the art was very unique and empowering in a way that a lot of people haven't seen African culture and Latin American culture. And so a lot of the people that came into our community at the initial stages were people that had never used crypto before, people who had never purchased an NFT before, but it appealed to them because of the values of the project. And so that's always been the focus for us, is just creating something that really appeals to people from our background that can onboard more of them into this space that we know is going to be really, really, really important in the years to come.
So are these NFTs historical figures, or are these representations of historical epochs and empires and such with fictionalized? I'm just trying to get a grasp.
Yeah.
So the NFTs are more of representations of some of the most legendary empires in African and Latin American history. So specifically on the Africa side, we have the Zulu Empire being depicted through the collection, and the Benin Kingdom, which is kind of like basically modern day Nigeria. On the Latin American side, we have the Incas and the Aztecs. So these are empires that most people have heard of in some context. A lot of times you think about these civilizations, and for the Aztecs specifically, people tend to point to like sacrifices, and negative things. And most people don't really know what these people looked like, or what like a warrior from these nations would have looked like back then. So by just creating these, yes, like they are kind of fictional depictions, but at the same time, we did leverage records from museums and kind of like did as much research as we could to understand, okay, this is what the typical Zulu spears look like. Okay, this is what like the typical Aztec headpieces look like. Now let's create as many of these assets as we can and kind of follow the model where possible, but also we're going to introduce our own little elements of supernaturalism. So you can see in the collection, actually, there's some warriors that will have like a spear that's made out of fire, or they'll have like white eyes like Superman, where, they look like a god warrior. We did add an element of futurism and supernaturalism into the collection, just to really emphasize that point of we are demonstrating power and confidence through our people. This is not us showing like a sick, starving African child. No, this is showing a warrior that literally is ready to conquer, the world and to conquer the next generation from whatever opportunities will present themselves.
Okay. That's awesome. I like the idea of using this collection to kind of onboard more people of color into the space, because like you said, I don't think a lot of people, myself included, it's intimidating somewhat to, when people just say crypto and Bitcoin and there's all this lingo that I don't necessarily understand, with this space. Even though I was married to John McAfee, I still, my brain is not wired that way, and sometimes things have to be explained to me like I'm a toddler, and so it can be an intimidating space to get into if you don't know, what you're doing, or if you don't have people to advise you. So I like the idea of you using this collection, this art collection, to get people excited about it, to, just I guess spark that interest in wanting to get more involved in this space, because it will be very important to be a part of it moving forward in the years to come, most definitely. And to have, as many of our people, on the ground floor would obviously be beneficial for the community as a whole, not just for people that look like us, but for everyone, just for the diversity of the space. And so I want to know, will you also be including in your collection maybe more modern takes on historical art? Maybe not necessarily, maybe an artist whose work that you like, or is also inspired by ancient sort of warriors or the ancient civilizations, but it has a more modern take. Is that going to be something, a part of your collection? And also what do you hope to, what more do you hope to come from your collection? Like how do you hope to maybe shift this into something more of a bigger conversation to be had, as far as onboarding people into the space, and maybe not just through the empires, the ancient empire collection?
That's a great question. So the core activity of Ancient Warriors, once we launched the collection in the community, has actually been hosting these in real life physical NFT galleries. So we've hosted 5 different galleries at cities around the world. We've hosted in LA, Miami, Denver, even Lagos, Nigeria. And then about 2 weeks ago, we hosted our 5th gallery in Lisbon in Portugal. So at each one of these galleries, we highlight only Black and brown artists. That's been the focus of all these galleries, and just giving these artists a chance to showcase their work to the rest of the world that they oftentimes, wouldn't have had that opportunity otherwise, right? A lot of these artists are super, super talented people. You'll see many of the artists in our community actually come from a country like Cuba. It just happens that you have so many talented artists that are in that space who have kind of caught wind of the crypto wave and kind of see it as an opportunity for them to add a new stream of income to their art career, or to their art passion that has never really been a career for them. And now through NFTs, we're able to kind of make that a reality for them, make that a career for them. So again, for each one of these events, we basically will put out an open call for any artist that comes from an African background or Latin American background. We'll host these Twitter spaces to kind of get people excited, and we'll purchase some of the artists' work to kind of show people like, hey guys, we're serious. Like, we're trying to showcase your work. We want to get it in front of the right people, and ultimately we want to drive sales for you, the artists. So yeah, we have been able to facilitate the sales of dozens of NFTs for the artists, bringing in thousands of dollars worth of dollars for them. We've taken absolutely zero commissions on any of that work. It's all just community focused, because a lot of people will ask us, why do you guys do this? What's your own incentive? I mean, for us, if there are more people that look like us coming into the space, we benefit from that, right? We get more people following us, interested in the work that we're doing, supporting us, more people that we can try to partner with in different types of ways. So it is really a win-win in the long term. And so that has really been the focus for us over the past year, just continuing to run more of these galleries and trying to, as much as we can, get more spotlight and more dollars flowing towards artists that come from our background.
Awesome.
That's interesting. Yeah, can I clone you? Is that? I say that half jokingly, but it's refreshing to hear somebody talk about some things that I've thought about in similar contexts. It's a big problem with history. And, when you start digging in with your teeth to history, you start to realize the nature of the problem almost immediately. And one of the things that I do sort of on the side for a hobby is to obtain and study, do my best to translate. I'm not a scholar, but different historical documents from different time periods. And when you start digging into there, you begin to get a picture of somebody's life who is completely otherwise omitted from the historical record. These are largely people you haven't heard of. And, you can get bits and pieces. And then you start to say, if it's a personal letter, you read some of the stuff that's there and you're like, this doesn't ring true. And so now, establishing this historical record, we're dealing not only with what's been lost and destroyed intentionally, but the lives of the people writing it down. I guess what I'm taking a long time to say is that I feel that the record of the achievements of many civilizations has been lost. And I personally don't buy the dating of civilization back only a few thousand years. I'm much more convinced. I mean, let's face it, people could always walk. As long as you could walk, I don't care what field there was, you're going to take a walk, and eventually you're going to find the guy in the next field. You're going to have to talk to him and work something out, or kill each other with sticks. Those are the alternatives. So I'm much more convinced by arguments that we could be looking at something as long as the post the last ice age. And so how many great empires would have risen and fallen then? When you say, I'm of African descent or I'm of South American descent, we know of some things, but what achievements can you look to? Is this not one of the handicaps that's faced, when you're then born into this world of that culture where, you can't hold this up? You mentioned, not to keep blathering, but I am trying to make a point. I mean, you mentioned that one of the first things people will talk about, which is a very real thing in the Inca, Aztec civilizations, is sacrifice. And I've always thought that was a strange thing to zero in on, because with all the other shit that they did and everything else that they achieved, would you mind explaining to me why that's any different than, say, the things that were done during the Inquisition, or just as standard punishment for atheists? Forget about what they did. That was for sport. If you were an atheist in the 13th, 14th, 15th centuries particularly, but even before that, you were getting treated to the worst type of carnal things that one human can do to another. And yet these aren't the first things that somebody would mention when they talk about the culture of Europe. I'm white. I can see it's a problem. I don't think some of the people offering answers are offering the correct ones or helpful ones. And that's why I say you're refreshing. You're a breath of fresh air. I think this approach is great in the sense that art is one of the best ways to inspire people. We know this. And so if you can show them some of that history, maybe even some of the lost history, you're filling in the blanks like a scholar has to. And I know they deny it and they say we're just about the facts, but they're filling in a lot of blanks. So, you do your representations and you're giving somebody the flavor of something they can be proud of, rather than just the ultimate outcome, which, you always have winners and you always have losers. But man, I mean, there's been a lot of good fights put up. Let's celebrate those.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, a good example is even these museums. I mentioned earlier that we did leverage these museums for a lot of the research we did to get a sense of, hey, like what some of these artifacts look like. But hey, we know these records have been tampered. We know, this is not the true source of truth. And even more, these folks that are holding on to these, the museums that we had to look at in order to see what did our people wear back then. It was not the African Museum or the Nigeria Museum or the Museum of Mexico. No, it was the New York Met Museum. It was the London Museum or the British Museum, right? Like, it was the Western museums. And if when you take a second to think about it, why would they have our most valuable possessions? Was that just given over? Was it lended? Was it stolen? Chances are it was taken unwillingly from our people. And so one of the initiatives that we did about a year ago, actually, like right around this time, we launched this campaign called bring back our artifacts or return stolen artifacts campaign. If you search the hashtag on Twitter, hashtag return stolen artifacts, you'll see some of those posts from about a year ago where we basically went online, we found pictures of various artifacts that came from these 4 empires that I've mentioned, and we posted them on Twitter. We would tag the museum where that artifact is located, and we would say, hey, return this artifact. It's our property. We want to see justice. That's it. And hey, I don't know how impactful we were, but I'll tell you what, there were some large, decisions that were passed to return large amounts of artifacts to the African region by some of these museums. I believe it was the British Museum who decided to return a couple hundred. It was either British or in Germany, where they decided to return a couple hundred stolen artifacts to Africa. So we're still waiting for the others. We're still waiting for answers. Most of them are quiet, but it's good to see that there is some progress being made in that direction.
I like that. I just wonder how drastically history would be changed if it were all on the blockchain. Could you imagine just having that detailed, unmutable and just evidence of our history? So much of our history has been doctored and edited, obviously, because whoever is the victor from a war, they get to write history. So that's what our history is, just the accounts of the victors, and however they decide they want to interpret whatever nation they were conquering at the time. So I really think that this is a powerful way to kind of correct history, if you will, in a way. And is there any other projects that you're working on related to this to kind of introduce people more into maybe what other things you may be working on? Or?
Yeah, so I'm working on a project called Shield that actually emerged out of Ancient Warriors. And the logo for Ancient Warriors is actually 2 crossed spears. And so there was a point in which, just like with the Return Stolen Artifacts campaign, we were very offensive, right? Even the name Ancient Warriors, we were a very offensive community. We would go after people when we felt like they were infringing upon our culture and things like that. But there was a point in which we realized that a lot of the people within our community, because they were so new into the crypto space and they didn't necessarily know how to read a smart contract. Smart contract is basically like the blockchain's version of your terms and conditions. But it's almost like you have to read through code to understand like what you are actually like signing access to. And so a lot of the people in our communities, because they weren't really familiar with this system, they would end up falling prey to malicious attacks and scams, and essentially, money that they would put into crypto, or in the case of one of those Cuban artists that I mentioned, he was able to accumulate over 1 Ethereum worth of assets from selling his art. At the time, 1 Ethereum was worth about $3,000. The minimum wage or the average salary in Cuba was around $100 per month. So that 1 Ethereum was literally worth, multiple years of hard work. And unfortunately, this artist had his wallet drained simply because he connected to the wrong website, or he clicked on a scam link by accident, not knowing what it was going to do. And that was something that was very painful for our community, that we all kind of took in pretty somberly. And just seeing more people falling prey to those types of attacks, we decided to take a step back from a lot of the onboarding focused work and the community focused work. And we said, hey, there's a huge problem in the space right now. There is a lack of security infrastructure. And as much as we want to bring more people that look like us into the space, you need to make sure that they're actually set up for success. If you're bringing them into the space and then they're getting scammed and they're losing thousands of dollars, you haven't done them any service, right? You've done them a disservice at the end of the day. So, right. I mean, I've been scammed before as well. So, I feel it, but I think when like the individual, like when I got scammed, I kind of blamed myself, and I was like, oh, I was an idiot. I'm just earning my stripes. I'm not really in NFTs until you've been scammed before. But I think when you tell someone else about it, you really sell them on like the benefits of crypto, and then they come in and something like that happens to them, you can't just tell them like, oh, you should have done your own research, you were an idiot. No, it's like, hey, this system is broken and it needs to be fixed. And so at this point, our team started prototyping out solutions to try to stop this scam problem and protect our community from interacting with malicious smart contracts and just malicious people in the space in general. So we started Shield, which is the defense layer that we believe will facilitate the onboarding of the next billion users, the next trillions of assets onto the blockchain.
Awesome. So how exactly does your Shield work? What do you do? How do the users, use your Shield, and what exactly does it do in terms of protecting these individuals from scams?
So the important thing to understand about blockchain security at the high level is that there tend to be kind of two buckets of attacks or threats. One of them is more kind of platform facing, where you have scammers who try to hack into like a big platform like Coinbase, right? Imagine trying to hack into like Amazon or Robinhood and pull out all of the money that's stored on that platform. That is like one big part of security, and there's a lot of more traditional crypto security companies that are tackling that problem. Now, there's another part of security that has emerged in the past year, because even if you make sure that a platform is secure, that doesn't mean that the users who are on that platform are secure from a standpoint of like the content on the platform. There can still be malicious content that gets uploaded into these platforms. So I guess the right comparison would be, think about Amazon. Even if Amazon is secure from like a code perspective and you've audited the code and you say, okay, Amazon can't necessarily be hacked, that doesn't mean that like a seller can't post a scam on Amazon or a seller can't post a scam on eBay, and then you as a buyer, you think that the platform is fully secure, but there's still malicious content that can negatively impact you on the platform. So this is kind of the big region of crypto security that has emerged as a huge problem over the past, I'd say, 2 years or so. And how Shield is addressing this, we've built a scam detection and content moderation engine. It's an API, which basically just means that it's a back-end technology. It's not something that you as a user would use, but platforms can integrate our API to essentially filter out any scams that are appearing in front of their users. So you can just call us a scam filter for Web3 platforms.
So to continue your Amazon metaphor, it would be as if your API would filter out all of those junk products that were complete ripoffs.
Exactly. And I don't really see like scams when I go on Amazon, but I think eBay is probably a better example, or even like Craigslist. These platforms, right? Exactly. These platforms that are like a little bit less moderated. It's more of like a free for all, and it's just like, hey, like, be smart. Be smart. You're kind of just trusting the person to be smart. If you're trying to set yourself up as like the household name, the platform that's going to be super friendly to all the new people in the space, especially just given how inherently complicated crypto is at this given point, you have to kind of like do some legwork to make sure that you're curating a positive user experience and not allowing your people to run into these types of like scam vectors.
And that was my follow-up. I don't know, I'm not going to ask you to give away your secret sauce, but how would you be looking at, just generally speaking, curating that particular type of content? So is this going to be AI recognition of patterns that would be associated, or are people actually going to be looking at these and submitting them or tagging them or whatever as being bad?
It's a combination of there is AI recognition that we're working on at the moment, but it's essentially a combination of looking at various metrics that enable you to decide whether there's malicious activity in that contract or in that wallet, or even at the website level. So let's take like a smart contract, for example. I don't want to get too complicated here, but for any given smart contract, there's different functions that you can call to that smart contract. So for example, if you're trying to buy an NFT, there's an NFT smart contract, and you're going to call the mint NFT or the buy NFT function in order to get that NFT. You would expect that function is going to perform in a very simple way. Hey, I send it $100 and it's going to send back to me an NFT. But if you go through the code, sometimes the logic might not be what you would expect. Sometimes, if you interact with that contract, it's actually going to drain all of the Ethereum out of your wallet. So it could drain $3,000 worth of Ethereum out of your wallet and give you nothing back. So our tool basically translates this into simple human language, so that you don't need to be a developer to be able to read and understand what you're about to sign. It's broken down to you in a very simple, consumer-friendly fashion. So that's kind of one core module that we use to detect malicious activity at the contract level.
Awesome. I like I like this project very much, and I like the fact that you're trying to do something to keep people from being scammed. I haven't had the misfortune of having that happen to me, but I'm also maybe a little too cautious in the space. So I do appreciate the fact that there are people out there that are attempting to address this problem, because it's very much like the Wild Wild West, and unfortunately there's so many scams, there's so many people that are just seeking to take advantage of people's lack of knowledge of the technology and of the lingo, I guess, if you will. And so I really like the shield that you're working on. I like this, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that develops, as well as your Ancient Warriors art as well, because it's beautiful. I like the concept, definitely. I like the idea of giving a space for people, like you said, that look like us, to have our own little corner of the world, if you will, where we have our representation and we're in control of that representation. I really like that.
It's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I would rather be working on anything else in the space right now. That's the beauty about these subjects that we're trying to tackle right now. They are clear problems, and you don't really have to convince people that there are problems, right? There's a very clear lack of diversity in the blockchain space and just tech in general. And we have an opportunity with the blockchain space to, like you said earlier in the conversation, be some of the initial, foundation setters of that industry and start things right compared to Web 2 or Web 1, where we got off to a very slow start in those verticals.
So, of all the non-extant cultures, okay, and of all of the stuff that you have learned doing your research, what is the most interesting thing that you can tell us about some ancient culture that we might not have heard?
It's a very good question. Okay, putting me on the spot. Give me a minute. Hey, it's been a while. There was a point where we were doing these Twitter spaces every week, where we would do a complete focus on one of those cultures, and then the next week we would do a different culture. And honestly, I was generally not the one who was kind of feeding everyone the useful information. It was more often people that would stumble upon the space, or people that were in our community because they were attracted through one of those empires that we were showcasing, and those individuals ended up educating us. So one thing that I do remember from the Aztec Twitter space that we did, there was someone that told us, so that point that I brought up earlier about this tendency to look at the sacrifices as the most relevant thing about Aztec culture. There was a word that they used to describe it, and it had fetishism in it. I don't remember what was the other word there, but there seems to be, it's a concept, and this isn't the first time that it's happened. It tends to happen where you have this advanced civilization that has done very, very impressive things, built very incredible technologies, and people will essentially try to smear them by literally just focusing the academic, discourse on those very trivial, demeaning kinds of things, and even something like sacrifice, right? They don't even go the length to explain to you what exactly the sacrifice was for. Generally, it's just kind of like, hey, that's just what they do. They were tribal. that's kind of the framing that you tend to hear, and it is like a very intentional thing. And there's been papers written about like kind of tracking all the different times that this has happened in history. So that was a very interesting observation. Unfortunately, that wasn't like a super positive one, but it is important to understand like the different ploys and mechanisms that people are using to try to bring us down as we try to bring ourselves up.
I think the best counter of that is being honest with ourselves about who we are. I mean, and the way I always put it is that be careful, stand back, because I am capable of the very worst thing that you've ever seen anybody do. And I may have protections in place or compartments in my mind or other things that I've set up and I call being civilized that keep me from that. And that's fine. That's good. That's what we hope develops in people. But truthfully, the very worst thing you've ever seen anybody do, you could do yourself. So we say from that, be careful in judgment or in simply casting aspersions. It doesn't mean that we let people be evil, but we do need to be careful about how we talk about things. And having studied some of those civilizations, not to a great extent, but to as much of an extent as of others that I'm familiar with, you certainly get the sense that to focus on that is to miss largely the point, to the point where that should only ever be a footnote, much as it is in Europe. And frankly, I don't think a lot of what was done there is talked about enough. So it's an interesting thing. I can understand your frustration with that, but the cure is never to just sit and pontificate about it. The cure is things like this. So you're now going to say, here's an alternate portrayal. This is the one that's been kept from you, and I'm sorry for that, but we can begin today. I too, like Janice, think that's fantastic. I can't say people like us, people that look like me, have had plenty of representation. There's no doubt about that. But I do appreciate the struggle. I guess you know what it is? Being such a stubborn individualist has always got, I always say I'm the smallest minority. I'm a minority of one, and at any given time could be up against everybody if they're all out of their minds. And it has felt that way sometimes. So I can empathize with the frustration you feel when you say there's much more to it than that. And this is a rich, beautiful history filled with successes, and that's an important part too, because I think there's also a tendency to focus on the failures. And I mean, anybody can point to failures in anybody else. And if that's what you're going to focus on, there's only one reason you're doing it. And like you just said, that's to smear them. So, we're coming up, we're actually a little over time. If there's anything else you'd like to add, please do. But otherwise, this has been a fantastic talk. And when you have something that you're doing in conjunction with this, we'd love to have you back.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's been a pleasure getting to meet both of you guys. Really enjoyed the conversation. And yeah, I just hope anyone who, if this spoke to you, if you're interested in learning about any of these cultures or learning about NFTs or crypto security, you know where to find me on Twitter, EmanFT, EmanNFT. You can always feel free to DM.
We're going to put everything in there so that they can find it and make sure that people know exactly how they can get to your project.
Awesome.
Actually, and I don't say this very often, but I do also have my own blog that I maintain. If you're interested, I'd like to start running little ads for your project on there. I do that free of charge and only for things that I like. So we'll extend that to you and we can deal with that offline. But Emmanuel, thank you so much for joining us. Janice, was there anything else that I missed that you wanted to add?
No, I'm really looking forward to seeing how your project develops, Emmanuel. I think it's awesome that you're taking on this task of just bringing a different version of our history to people that look like us, just to inspire people. There's just so much negativity happening in the world, and I think this may be a way to just kind of bring us together and help us to celebrate our history, and at the same time, not necessarily demonizing why it's been the way that it is, because we can discuss that as much, until we're blue in the face, which is what we've been doing. But so I like that you are proactively trying to change that narrative, without, like I said, demonizing why it's been that way. And so I'm really excited to see how your Ancient Warriors project develops, and maybe even being able to attend one of your live galleries. That would be amazing. But thank you so much for coming on the show. And yeah, I'll keep an eye out for you and watch how you develop.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, you guys have an awesome weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Yes.
And since Janice opened, I will do my duty and close. I will pick up Janice's tagline for today. Peace out. See you next time.